restaurant, dining, and bars. As we go through this process, we want to make sure that our small businesses can support themselves and that these are the minimum restraints necessary from a public health perspective that allow businesses to support themselves. And so I'm proud that we're taking additional steps today to allow restaurants that are maintaining delivery and takeout to also make alcohol sales alongside food sales. This will help them continue to stay afloat during these trying times. We are temporarily suspending the license requirement. If they're licensed to sell beer, alcohol in their restaurant, they will now be able to do so for takeout or delivery during this difficult time to help support the jobs of those in food services. We are also, in the last day, temporarily suspended elective, non-essential procedures. That's both for humans and veterinary through April 14th, and that is really a short-term need for medical equipment, including personal protective equipment and ventilators. The supply chains are very crunched in the short term with regard to the personal protection equipment that will be needed. Now, this nation has great industrial capacity, as does the state. I've seen a lot of creativity both here and across the country and across the world. Soon, this PPE, personal protection equipment deficit, will be met. That is a matter of weeks. At that point, people will be able to resume their elective procedures. I want to be clear, these are things that people need but are not life-threatening. It could be, one thing's plastic surgery, LASIK, knee replacement. We are respecting the doctor-patient relationship if something is needed to prevent further deterioration of health or in any way puts the patient's life at risk. Of course it will be done. But this is about a 2-week delay in other procedures simply because of the need for that protective equipment to be used to urgently save lives. By the way, many of the providers have already done this, to be clear. This is just the few that haven't that would be affected. Finally, we are extending enrollment for workers who lost their jobs and lost their health care coverage to sign up for health care coverage that can be subsidized on the state exchange, Connect for Colorado, through April 3rd. You can visit Connect for Health Colorado website or dial 855-752-6749 to enroll. Earlier this week, we launched our viral hashtag #DoYourPartCO campaign. And we encourage everybody to share your practices around social distancing to help increase the support from the public that around these actions that individuals are taking. We announced the COVID-19 Relief Fund, and we set up our volunteer effort, helpcoloradonow.org. I'm very proud to say that on the helpcoloradonow.org front, philanthropists, individuals, donors large and small, companies have donated about $3.8 million, and that includes $318,000 raised online from over 2,000 individual donors in working with Mile High United Way. We deeply appreciate your help, and if you do have the ability, please support our fellow Coloradans at helpcoloradonow.org. On the volunteer side, I'm proud to say that Coloradans are stepping up. We've secured commitments from 4,342 individuals to be willing to help in this crisis. In that sign-up process to volunteer at helpcoloradonow.org, people specify what their skills are. Obviously, there's a premium on people with skills in the medical fields, but there will be a need, and there's likely to be a need for your help in many different areas, right? It could be for emergency child care for those who work in the emergency sectors. It could be around logistics. It could be around construction. So if you're, again, willing to help, please consider signing up to volunteer at helpcoloradonow.org. As wonderful as this is, fundraising and volunteer work, of course, does not replace individual actions people take, nor does it replace government action in combating both the public health and the economic consequences of this pandemic. And today I'm going to focus on these economic consequences. Locally, in our communities, local businesses, the state, United States of America, and of course the world have all been affected because of this outbreak. And again, like so many things, and like the public health side, it will get worse before it gets better. We know that the past 2 weeks have been tough. There's Coloradans who've lost their jobs as bussers, as wait staff, in kitchens, in other areas. And this week has been particularly tough on the small business owners as well, who wonder whether they're able to make their rent. And that applies to our small business owners whether they've had to close their doors for public health orders or they've just seen their customers dry up. There's a lot of pain and difficulty on both sides. So I want to talk about us providing the maximum flexibility, waivers from unnecessary regulations, help that we can do to help make sure that our business recovery is robust and that we can make it through these tough times. Yesterday, I was proud to announce that we, as a state, qualified for the Federal Small Business Administration's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. I want to thank our federal delegation for supporting that work. It means that small businesses, as well as private nonprofit organizations and agricultural co-ops in all 64 counties, can seek individual low-interest small business loans of up to $2 million. And given the current low interest rates, which have gotten even lower in the last weeks, this is really a great opportunity to help our small businesses stay afloat and weather the storm. All the information for that is at choosecolorado.com. And we know that those are important steps. The steps that we'll be talking about in a moment that the state is taking are also important. But frankly, we need as much stabilization and help from the federal government as possible. And I'm formally encouraging our federal delegation to think big and to pass legislation that stabilizes the economy and prepares it for further economic growth. That includes things like increasing the federal medical assistant percentages, the funding match to provide state Medicaid agencies to 12%. It includes ideas like delivering cash payments of at least $2,000 per American, with additional relief measures for people that work in industries that have been disproportionately affected in hospitality and food services and travel and tourism. It means an increase in child care funding, an increase in SNAP benefits, and suspension of an executive order that would take SNAP benefits away during this crisis. It also means tax relief. It means cash payments and loan assistance for Colorado small businesses. It means minimizing the delays in the U.S. Department of Labor's processing of uninsurance claims, and of course, relief from debt collection where possible. I hope our federal delegation and the administration think big and take the steps needed now to help stabilize jobs in the economy so Colorado families and families across our country are able to put food on the table. Now, in the meantime, there's plenty that we can do at the state level to help act now to provide Colorado families relief. We're working on an executive order that allows our unemployment insurance division to expedite payment of claims. We're seeing unprecedented demand, of course, on the unemployment claims filing system. We encourage COVID-impacted workers to look at that website, the Colorado UI website, in the morning or late at night if you're having trouble getting on during the peak hours. A record number of people have successfully registered, and we are working rapidly on increasing the number of simultaneous transactions that can occur. But if you're having trouble, early morning, late at night. Now, we also recognize that there's many employers and industries that are seeking workers, and these jobs are essential in the weeks and months ahead. Safeway, King Soopers, Amazon, many others are hiring right now, and that's important for you if you need a job. It's also important for our food supply and logistical supply systems that those jobs are filled. And for a lot of folks, you know, it's about more than a paycheck. It's really about your identity and part of what gives you purpose in life and rising to the occasion of helping to meet the needs of the moment. In this time of crisis, we truly have a common purpose: saving lives and lessening the impact of the virus and the spread of the virus. And we know that there's needed workers in those fields: healthcare, food services, logistics. And please connect with your former employer if you are a healthcare qualified worker, paramedic, nurse practitioner, doctor, because we will need you. And employers in the supply chain, City Market, King Soopers, Safeway, Walmart, Target, many others, as well as shipping, Amazon, U.S. Postal Service, UPS, again, all hiring. So if you're looking for work, you can check out some of those employers directly. Also register at connectingcolorado.com. That's the state portal for the labor exchange. We encourage employers to participate in post job openings there as well and update what might be available. We're exploring ways to offer more opportunities virtually for those who need to work in isolation right now, and we look forward to expanding those opportunities and removing any bureaucratic barriers to that as well. But we can't just rely on providing relief on the income side. We also need to address families' financial obligations. I was thrilled that the federal government is suspending all foreclosures and evictions for 60 days for homeowners that have mortgages that are insured by the Federal Housing Administration. Furthermore, this allows those impacted by coronavirus to suspend mortgage payments due to hardship for up to 12 months. Now, we can't ask people to stay at home to stop the spread of coronavirus if we are not giving them the tools they need to be able to keep their home, whether they're renting or whether they have mortgage payments. If people are going to stay in their homes, they need to be able to have a home. That's why we're taking additional state action on top of that federal action, really consistent with its goals. In addition to this federal action, we're taking action at the state level, and of course we're encouraging the private sector to help as well in providing relief from evictions, foreclosures, and utility shutoffs. And I know that this crisis is impacting everyone differently. We want to ensure that people aren't losing their home or utility service because of the public health emergency that wasn't your fault. The spread of the virus is not your fault. You should not lose your home or your utilities simply because a restaurant forced to close down to prevent hundreds or thousands of Coloradans from dying. Shortly, we'll release an executive order that takes a number of steps. We're working with state chartered financial institutions to combat the threat of residential and commercial foreclosures and displacements. We're also encouraging banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions that are holding residential or commercial mortgages to follow the lead of FHFA and halt foreclosures and related evictions. Align your policies. The creditors should align their policies with FHFA, the biggest, but the others need to align their policies with that for this to work systemically to ensure that these temporary income reductions and job loss are not amplified in the loss of people's homes. In addition, I'm further requesting that financial institutions consider providing a 90-day deferment of payments for consumer loans. That includes residential, commercial, refis, auto loans, student loans during this period. And we also request that property owners and landlords refrain from removing tenants or mobile home owners without cause or need to protect the public safety or minor violations unless public safety requires it. I'm also requesting that property owners and landlords refrain from imposing any fee for the late payment or non-payment of rent until April 30th. And I'm requesting that municipal and county governments refrain from using law enforcement from carrying out evictions or foreclosures against Colorado families unless there is a threat to our public safety. I am, through executive order, ensuring that no state law enforcement resources will be used for evictions or foreclosures, and I'm asking our municipal police and sheriffs to follow suit. We have to prioritize our law enforcement resources during this crisis, and clearly the priority should be not enforcing eviction orders, again, unless there are a particular eviction order related to protecting the public safety. But in general, we need all of our law enforcement resources that we can get, and it's important that local jurisdictions, police chiefs and sheriffs issue similar guidance to what we're issuing with regard to our state troopers and other state law enforcement resources. On the utility side, we're requesting that all public utilities suspend service disconnections for delayed or missed payments. It's getting warmer out there, but there's still snow on the ground. We simply cannot leave families without heat or electrical power, especially when the public health situation is such that we want them to remain in their homes when possible. Xcel has already taken that step, but we want to make sure that the other utility providers across the state also are not disconnecting people in the middle of this crisis simply because they're unable to pay because they might have lost their job as on wait staff or busser or in the other areas. It's also important that we help people with regard to tax relief. In addition to mortgage, rent, and utility protections, I'm pleased to announce that today I'm extending the income tax payment deadline for Colorado taxpayers for 90 days until July 15, 2020, without penalty, without interest. That includes all filers, all businesses, all individuals, all filers will have that 90-day extension. That goes further than the federal order. We know that many individual taxpayers and businesses have difficulty with this COVID disruption. Your impact to pay is affected by quarantine, by infection, by many other issues, and this is a critical step that'll help our businesses and families keep more money in their pockets while we weather this crisis. Now, while this extension is similar to the IRS extension, it goes further. Unlike the federal government, we're imposing no conditions, no caps on the amount of tax that can be deferred for the 90-day period. In addition, we're granting an extension for taxpayers who are required to make estimated income tax payments for the 2020 tax year. Estimated payments due on and after April 15th, but on or before June 20th, can be paid at any time on or before July 15th without penalty. Colorado has 2.5 million taxpayers, including individuals and businesses, and we hope that this gives them one less thing to worry about in the midst of this crisis. I'm also directing the Department of Revenue to work with local governments that choose to extend payment deadlines for property, sales, and use tax. So in our state, these generally have both a state and local component. And we want to make sure that if a city or a county wants to find a way to defer that, it may be state collected in sales tax in some areas. Our home rule cities generally collect it themselves, but it's a share between the state and the local. But I want to give clear guidance that where local jurisdictions would like to extend that 30 or 60 days, they have a more than willing partner at the state, whether we collect it or whether they're collected. Now again, we have to make sure we can get the technical implementation on that right. But for local jurisdictions to really look at those property sales and use tax pieces and see whether it makes sense in your community and whether your community can still balance its public cash flow by extending that 30 or 60 days, you will find a willing partner in the state. Those are primarily local taxes, but I want to work with local governments and take whatever action they need that allows them to waive penalties or fees during this crisis. And of course, some might also want to prioritize small businesses like bars or restaurants. So they might want to prioritize use and sales tax deferral around bars and restaurants, but they have a good partner in us in making that happen. Right now, of course, our Emergency Operations Center, our command structure, is focused on the immediate public health need. That means making sure we have enough tests, enough equipment, enough healthcare workers, enough hospital beds, that we slow the spread to give us more time to build. But we know now, and we will know even more in the future, the economic damage and the after effects of this crisis locally, statewide, countrywide, and globally. And Coloradans are counting on us to manage both the public health crisis, short and medium term, but also the economic crisis, so people can support themselves and that business is positioned for a strong recovery. To fill that need and to make sure we provide the best response, I've assembled a team of key economic advisors to help inform our decisions to navigate these challenging times. This council will be chaired by former U.S. Transportation Secretary and Denver Mayor and Vestar Capital Partners Managing Partner Federico Peña. In addition, the council will be composed of Gary Arnold with Pipe Fitters, Deborah Jordy, Science and Cultural Facilities District, Dick Monfort, owner and CEO of the Rockies, Blair Richardson of Bow River Capital, Jim Crow, retired CEO of Level 3, and Brad Feld, entrepreneur and co-founder of the Foundry Group. All of these individuals have been willing to spend significant amounts of their time in the coming weeks and months in helping make sure that Colorado is structured to lead the way for an economic recovery. And I want to thank them for lending their private sector expertise, guidance, and eyes to any of the actions that are being taken on the public side. We will seek their advice in additional regulations that can be waived or deferred, or ways that we can, through tax deferral, allow capital formation to occur in the private sector. We will be supporting this council, this emergency council, with other officials, including our Treasurer Dave Young, Lauren Larson, Kerry Kennedy, Joe Barella, and Rick Garcia at DOLA will all interface with this group of private sector entrepreneurs that will also be expanded to look in different areas. Together, this group will look at all of the policy tools and resources we have to minimize economic damage that this public health crisis is causing. I want to welcome Federico Peña so he can tell you more about the short and long-term goals of the Governor's Emergency Council for Economic Stabilization and Growth. Mayor Peña.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much, Governor, and good morning, everybody. Let me first thank the Governor for your leadership, Governor. You probably haven't heard this enough, but I'm going to say it. Your decisive and bold action and your comprehensive strategies that he announced today and that he has previously announced are precisely the kinds of actions we need to protect the health and safety of Colorado citizens and also to begin to address the enormous economic impact that we're going to see on our state. So, Governor, thank you for that leadership. The governor's asked me to chair this council. I'm happy to do it. By way of some background, some of you may know me primarily for my government experience, but for the last 20 years, I have been an investor, working both for a private equity fund and now the Colorado Impact Fund, which has invested in 10 Colorado companies over the last 5 years. I'm a senior advisor there, so I've had a good exposure to what has been happening to small and medium-sized businesses, not only in the state, but throughout the country. So I want to thank the governor for asking me to serve. I'm happy to serve, and I want to thank my fellow council members, 2 of whom are here today, because this is going to take a lot of hard work. Betsy Markey is going to be our key coordinator with the entire cabinet, and I want to thank her. She's already been quickly at work on this effort, and we're going to get the job done. Let me begin by putting this in a global context, and the governor referred to this, but this is to give you a sense of the enormity of the challenge we're going to face. This is a global economic challenge, the likes of which I have not seen in my lifetime. Think about this. The European economy was probably going to be flat before the virus. The Chinese economy is probably imploding as we speak. And now it's affecting our hemisphere, given all the trade disputes we've had. So both Canada, Mexico, the United States, and now South America had already been affected from a financial and economic perspective. And now we have the virus. So the extraordinary impact we're going to see on the state, not just on local businesses, but particularly on individuals, is unheralded. And we're going to need the kind of strategic thinking that the governor has asked us to employ to help us not only get through this challenge, but to come out of it even stronger from an economic perspective. So in that sense, I want to discuss the fact that we're going to focus both on short-term and long-term strategies. Just to put this in perspective, I've already, Governor, spoken to a number of restaurant owners, and they are challenged. What do they do with their workforce? What do they do with their closed restaurants? Some of them were asking that alcohol be added. You did that today. They're very grateful for that. This morning I spoke to a small farmer in southern Colorado. He's worried about the value of the dollar, because if the value of the dollar continues to increase while the euro and other currencies go down, it will be harder for him to export his product throughout the world. So this is extremely complicated, and our task now is to focus both on the short term and long term. There are going to be 2 special emphasis that we're going to have. One is going to be on workers, employees, and the governor has already announced some immediate actions to address their needs. And the second is going to be on the business community, both small business in particular and medium and large businesses. And in addition to that, we cannot forget companies that are involved in international trade. So we're going to have to look at that also. The good news is that the Colorado economy is more diverse than it's been in many, many years. But we are not exempt from this economic challenge, and we are ready for the task. So, number 1, the 7 members the governor announced today, I want you to know we're going to expand that group. We want to make sure we cover every economic sector of the state: hospitality, agriculture, energy, small business, financial institutions, transportation, infrastructure, utilities, housing, healthcare, and there may be others. So this is not the only group that is going to be working on this, as the governor just announced. We're going to have subcommittees with many more individuals to bring the best ideas and the best talent that we have throughout the state to give us the most effective strategies that we can then present to the governor and his cabinet so that he can then implement those as quickly as possible. So speed is of the essence here, because first of all, we've got to help workers and companies that are struggling right now. And secondly, we want to demonstrate confidence to the broader economic players in the state that we are moving in the right direction. Let me summarize, and I'm not going to go through all of them, some of the short-term and long-term strategies we're going to be focusing on. In terms of short-term, medical costs, paid sick leave coverage for COVID-19 testing, treatment, and quarantine, strengthening the availability and utility of unemployment insurance, temporary tax deferrals that the governor's already referred to, both for businesses and individuals, both at the state and local level. We need to remember that, for example, most of our property taxes are levied by the school systems. We have to work with them to figure out how they can give some support to property owners who are having trouble paying their property taxes. Small business loans. The governor's already established a relationship with the federal SBA and the local SBA. How do we get that moving along? Income tax benefits for reskilling and upskilling talent for the transition that we're going to have when we get through this. We may have a very different economy when we get through this. And how do we then train our current workers to be prepared for that new economy? Those are some of the immediate short-term strategies. There'll be more. In the long term, we're going to look at the countercyclical infrastructure stimulus investments in transportation. We know, for example, that we need to invest more in infrastructure in this state. Large capital stock, governmental bonds, we're going to examine all that. We've talked earlier about trade impacts. What can we do here in the state to alleviate some of the negative trade impacts? Ensuring and incentivize resilient, diversified supply chains, unemployment insurance, bankruptcies, etc. So this is going to be a comprehensive and a very broad, deep analysis of strategies we can bring to the governor and his cabinet. Let me end with this comment. And I don't want to be in any way alarmist, but this is going to be difficult. This is unique. The challenge we face is extraordinary. But thankfully, we've got great leadership at the state level, from the business community, from the civic sector, to get through this and come out stronger. It's going to take some time. So we're preparing for worst case economic impacts, but we're hopeful that we can ameliorate some of those, stop them before they become too enormous, and then come out of this even stronger. So I want to end by thanking all of you, because you, the media, have been critical, absolutely critical, in getting out the information that the governor has been outlining today and talking about some of the things that we're going to be doing, because there are lots of people out there who are worried and they're concerned. And the reason I want to thank you and encourage you to do more of this is we have seen what has happened in other states where people are not paying attention. They're on beaches. They're doing things that are unthinkable. And so we need to continue to educate and inform Colorado citizens through your support. So, Governor, thank you very much for asking us to do this. We are backing you 100%. We're going to get this job done. And congratulations to you and your team.
So we wanted to make sure that there was no delay in setting up this effort, because we know that both the health impact and the economic impact of this crisis are going to be really affecting a lot of Coloradans. Many of us will be affected by the public health crisis that's occurring. Somebody you know, your aunt, your uncle, your parent, grandparent, perhaps yourself, will have their health severely jeopardized. There will be loss. But all of us will be impacted by the economic side of this crisis. And getting this team going now is so important, rather than 2 weeks from now or a month from now, to make sure that we have this kind of input to minimize economic disruption consistent with the public health needs, and to maximize our ability to have an effective recovery in Colorado where folks can get back to work and earn a good living. And the people of this state are counting on this council and the additional business and worker representatives that they tap to begin this important work now. While we are moving forward with our public health response, we have the emergency command structure in place, we're scaling hospitals, we're acquiring more personal protective equipment, we're scaling up testing, we're doing all those things. We also need this effort to make sure that we can have a strong and robust recovery when this is all over, and it will be all over, and most of us are going to be just fine. It doesn't mean you won't be touched by loss. We hope to minimize that. But we're all going to be touched by the economic circumstances that we live under. I'm very hopeful that between our federal delegation and action in Congress is needed, the work we're doing at the state level with this new Emergency Council for Economic Stabilization, and the thoughtful leadership at the local level, we will be better prepared than any other cities and states in the entire country to weather this storm. But these times are difficult, but they will be temporary. Coloradans should know that we'll get through this together. We'll be well positioned for success. We're standing up our Emergency Business Council now to already think about how we can grow jobs and protect jobs throughout and after this global economic crisis. And at the same time, we're charging forward with bold actions on the public health response, including the additional steps that have been taken in the last few days, and providing additional relief consistent with the public health, like allowing restaurants to deliver beer and wine. Since they're already doing those deliveries, there's zero additional public health considerations, so we wanted to enable that as soon as possible. Any other restrictions that can be eased, we want to look at in as strategic a way as possible to make sure that we can expeditiously act to allow the market mechanisms to continue to grow our economy. I want to thank all of you for joining us. The first question I'm going to entertain is from a reporter that is submitting them remotely, which I can encourage you to do for future sessions, and we'll make that a feature of every press conference to avoid unnecessary risk. The question is from Erica Meltzer. Chalkbeat, how would a shelter-in-place order apply to food distribution in schools and any in-person programs?
And Governor Jared Polis will start now to take questions, and you can continue to watch the question and answer segment of this at 9news.com or on the 9 News app. As far as what the governor had to say, mostly talking about that Emergency Council for Economic Stabilization and Advisory.
After spring break, school districts are they've made online plans to deliver those curricular vehicles. Students will not lose this year of education. They will be ready to graduate, ready to move on to the next year. And of course, we're looking into all those contingencies. One of the reasons that it's so important for all of us to stay in where possible, to avoid large crowds, is to avoid having to take additional steps that could be even more detrimental to the economy. So the better that people can contain the spread of this virus in Colorado, the less likely it is that additional steps would have to be taken that save lives, but have that very difficult economic trade-off. Next question.
Governor, can you talk about what the governments of California and New York have done today? Are you close to maybe thinking about doing something like that here in Colorado? And if not, why?
We're monitoring what all 50 governors are doing. Just as importantly, we have monitored and looked at what other countries have done, both successful, Korea, Taiwan, unsuccessful, Italy. We're really modeling what Colorado does on the best practices that work. We brought in additional outside help to help scale up our testing, provide for what a new normal might look like to allow the maximum amount of economic activity, while of course addressing the short-term issues around the surge of patients that's expected in the week or two ahead, and taking immediate action to prevent the further extension of the virus. So we are in real time looking at all of the different actions that different countries and states have taken to help determine what makes the best sense here in Colorado. Yes.
Governor, where is that threshold for you on shelter in place? Obviously, you saw what happened in California and New York. Where is your personal threshold on making?
Well, the actions that we've taken in the last 24 hours have built upon the public health order that required the shutdown of in-restaurant dining and bars. We have also made sure that this applies to salons, hair and nail, massage and tattoo parlors, and spas. And those are areas that people congregate. Again, what spreads this virus is not economic activity per se, it's large congregations of people. So we're looking at trying to target where those vectors can be, where people are congregating and spreading the virus, and finding effective ways that we can delay those mass gatherings or allow for virtual gatherings. In our office and with state workers, we're encouraging telecommuting. We're trying to find ways that more can do their job remotely. I think we're over 30% of the state workforce is working remotely. We want to ramp that up, and we want to increase that. No matter where you work, private sector, public sector, if you have cold-like symptoms, flu-like symptoms, please stay home and isolate yourself. That's the single biggest message that I can give you right now. Don't worry if you need medical treatment, call medical professionals. For most people, you will not need medical intervention, but please don't put other lives at risk, and don't see others until the symptoms have subsided for at least 5 days.
Governor, what have you done in the last 48 hours to get more tests here to Colorado? Have you reached out to any private businesses? And also, as a follow-up to what you said 48 hours ago, we didn't have a count in our state on the number of ventilators. What have you done to potentially get more ventilators in our state?
So on the second one, the action around a temporary cessation of elective procedures is designed to allow personal protective equipment and ventilators, which can also be converted from anesthesia units, to flow up to meet the surge needs. So that work is occurring now. And again, at some point when that short-term supply challenge is met, those procedures will be able to occur again, even during the healthcare crisis. It's not the coronavirus crisis per se that necessitates, from a healthcare perspective, the cessation of these surgeries. It is the equipment, short-term equipment crunch, and that includes ventilators as well as personal protective equipment. We are rapidly working to scale up testing. There are several technological ways to do that. We are setting up our overall structure for that team. Every day seems like a lifetime. I think in general we're going to try to do these public availabilities Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That could change, but Monday seems like it'll be an entire, year between now and Monday. But what I'd like to do, hopefully Monday or soon, is walk you through the overall command structure and how we're thinking about scaling the testing, how we're thinking about the new normal, how we're thinking about how the economic piece fits in. We'll walk you through how all that fits together in the decision-making structure and the command structure, hopefully Monday, if not, Tuesday or Wednesday. Decide, yes.
Governor, why wasn't the unemployment website prepared for this surge that you could have probably predicted was coming? That's what we fixed.
Well, first of all, everybody who wants to register for UI will be able to. We have processed an enormous number of applications. If the traffic to the website short term locks you out, please try it at 10 or 11 at night. Try it at 5, 6, 7 in the morning. I would add that, again, people are absolutely getting through and registering now at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., but others are not because of that peak capacity. You will not lose out on benefits. You will not lose out on eligibility. We are working in real time to scale the number of transactions that can be handled simultaneously on the unemployment website. I'll go to you next. Go ahead.
Governor, have you made any requests towards the national stockpile of equipment? And do you have any numbers specifically? And also, how's the state stockpile doing? Give the information on where that equipment's been given to, what hospitals, and are we in good shape?
On the personal protective equipment front, which I think is what you're asking about, I talked to the Secretary of Defense today. We've had conversations with Homeland Security and Human Services. About a quarter of that national stockpile has been delivered to Colorado. It is a smaller number than we'd like. It is being deployed. We've also tapped into the state stockpile for the surge in Eagle County, which is a week to two ahead of what's hitting the metro area. But if you look at the percentage and the people and the overflow in Eagle County, that's a good indicator of where proportionally the Denver metro area will likely be in a week to 10 days. So we have tapped the state stockpile. We have received about a quarter of what has been promised federally. We want and are seeking and are continuing to talk to the administration about the prompt delivery in the next few days of that other 75%. Who is in? Yes.
Will the state be offering any funds or additional support for businesses and individuals who are stepping up to create PPE?
Well, again, we want to have a thriving business sector. That's why we're delaying the income tax payments. We're happy to work with local jurisdictions to delay property use, sales tax. All of those things are occurring. There have been many Colorado businesses. In Lyons, a distillery is now making hand sanitizer. The first potential masks have been produced here in Colorado with a capacity of about 2,000 or 3,000 per month. We have also, as you know, the construction-rated N95 masks have now been rated for medical, so we've worked with Home Depot and others, construction companies, to get that supply in for this surge in the short term. And over time, the industrial capacity will more than meet this demand, to be clear. That doesn't just mean in Colorado, it means nationally, internationally. We need, obviously, reliable supply chains. But the industrial capacity of Colorado, the industrial capacity of America is unmatched. It's just a lag factor. That's one of the reasons that these really strong social distancing measures are being taken now. It's to delay the spread of this pandemic to a point where our industrial capacity can catch up and we're not limited with regard to masks and ventilators and space in the way that we would be if this all hit without these social distancing measures. Mary Ann?
Yeah, small oil and gas operators, which are small businesses, are asking for you to suspend the COGCC's rulemaking process for right now. Are you considering that?
Well, I'm surprised. They've in the past wanted that to proceed as fast as possible. Like a lot of state functions, I wouldn't be surprised if that is slowed down simply because of the impact of the virus on the state workforce. We are prioritizing the response to the virus across different agencies. Now, COGCC doesn't have a direct nexus that I'm aware of in virus response. But of course, there's particularly concern in the energy sector about the collapse of world energy markets. There is a confluence of two events that are occurring. Coronavirus is one. Lord knows that would be enough. But there's also OPEC politics and increased supply coming online while demand is dropping. So we, again, want to do what we can. All of those small businesses have the deferral on their income taxes. If they want to work with their local jurisdictions, we can work with them on the deferral of other taxes as well.
Governor, will you be issuing any explicit guidance to jails, prisons, courts, perhaps order? And then also, can you be clear about evictions and foreclosures? Are you issuing the order, or is that simply guidance presented?
Well, under the law enforcement resources under my control, we're establishing a clear enforcement priority that they are not to do evictions over this time period. Unless public safety is involved. We are encouraging the sheriffs and police departments to align themselves with that state guidance as soon as possible. We need those law enforcement resources. It's not going to be the highest and best use of their time to protect the public safety to enforce any eviction orders in the next month or two. What was your first question? Yeah, so we are taking additional steps. I'm sure we can, when you look at all the things that we do, each area is part of this emergency response. So I think on a specific question like that, if you're doing a piece, again, Dean Williams, our Director of Corrections, has been engaged with this. I'm sure we can get you a list of the steps that are already being taken in our prisons, counties, county jails, we also have facilities run directly by the state on the youth detention side, long-term care facilities. Our immediate prioritization is around those who are most vulnerable, our long-term care facilities and others. We'll be happy to update you on some of the specific steps that we've taken in that area. One more from this side.
Why not make this guidance towards landlords and utilities order?
Well, again, Excel has already done this on the utility side. We are looking to do this and make sure that all of our utility providers do this in the state. With regard to landlorders, there is different control of state law, of law enforcement resources in this state. I'm very optimistic that police chiefs and sheriffs will align with this. We're making it clear, leading by example, that we are prioritizing our state law enforcement resources during this crisis.
Governor, if you look at the response from Coloradans, the hashtag and all of that, the fact is there are some people listening and watching that think this is a government overreach. California said yesterday 56% of the population in the next 8 weeks would likely get this virus. Is there a number you have heard from here in Colorado? And if not, why not put that number out to make this more of a reality?
We are in regular contact with our state epidemiologist, our chief medical officer. They've pulled in a larger group of folks, both through our GERC as well as at CU, that are modeling the different public health outcomes here. To be clear, and I don't know what particular model Gavin Newsom saw, I can say that we are working on, there are several models that I've seen. We're working on a state model. Of course, when we have information that we can be transparent about, we will, but I don't want to put too much emphasis on any one model. What I want to do is, generally you get a better result when you average a bunch of models or you take a midpoint of the different models, and that would be my general approach to this. But at the same time, you absolutely need to be cognizant of those worst case scenarios, because those are not impossible scenarios. They may be outliers, and we're going to look at the midpoint of where those models are, but we need contingency planning around all of those different. Let's we're going to align our resources to prepare for the middle scenario. We want to make sure where we have what we need to in place for the worst case scenario, and we're going to hope and pray for the best case scenario. A remote question from Ed C. Lover. It was a question about banks, utilities, and landlords when it comes to not evicting or penalizing folks. I think he had a specific question around the language in there, what is being requested of whom. We will have that EO out ASAP, as we've been doing. We're generally announcing them, and then they'll be released the same day. So that EO will be finalized. I will sign it, and we'll get out today. You'll see all the details that'll be included. Yes.
Governor, we're hearing some reports from our viewers about possible false negative results with testing, and also test results taking up to 5 days to get back to folks. Is this accurate? And if so, what are you doing about that?
So the testing landscape, and I'll sort of talk about this and explain this in detail, then we'll take one more question. There's testing that's done for 4 purposes. We have clinical testing. That's for something who's exhibiting symptoms and needs medical attention. They will be tested because they need to be known whether they can be put in isolation or with others. That's clinical testing. Secondly, we have testing for purposes of epidemiological data. That's, for instance, testing folks in San Juan County, testing folks in Summit County. We have stood up and are moving around the mobile testing lab to really be able to act on better information. There's testing for screening. That's a third purpose. That means testing for people that might be interfacing with senior facilities and serving some of our more vulnerable Coloradans to have in place a system where they can be screened to make sure that they're negative for the virus. And fourth, there's mass testing. We have a unit in place that will work on scaling that up as quickly as possible. So all 4 of those. Now, getting to the methodologies, for tests that are being sent out of state for LabCorp and Quest, yes, that time period that you indicated is roughly correct. That's 4 or 5 days for tests that are being processed in out-of-state labs. We also have a state lab that we are looking at scaling the capabilities of, and we already increased the capabilities of. More importantly, there's more private sector capacity in the state, and that means folks like UC Health, Children's, Kaiser, others are looking at scaling that up. There are also pilot programs. There's a project that's in San Juan County now that's testing. So there's different ways to test. And I would also point out, I think this, and I don't know any specifics about what you called a false negative, but the thing is just because you have a negative at one point in time doesn't mean you have a negative in 4 days or a week. So if you're exhibiting flu-like symptoms, you would likely test positive at that point. But as you're looking at people that are asymptomatic and we get to kind of this screening or mass testing, it doesn't mean that you might not test positive right away. So there's that lag factor. So for anybody who's ill, you generally stay home from work. That becomes an imperative rather than a request at this point. If you have cold-like symptoms, and also don't panic. You have cold-like symptoms. It may be a cold, it may be the flu, it may be coronavirus, it may be something else. Stay at home. If you need medical attention, if you're having severe difficulty breathing, if you are having trouble or your partners are recognizing that you're having symptoms that require medical treatment, that's when you call a medical provider. And they let them know that, again, you're worried that it might be coronavirus. The symptoms are generally respiratory, but they can be more general than that as well. So you don't need, most 85% of people who get this will not require medical attention. The issue is the people that do and the capabilities of our healthcare system, beds, equipment, ventilators, personal protection equipment, to be able to provide and meet that surge. Last question.
Yes or no? Is there a chance you could issue a shelter-in-place or lockdown this weekend? Can you give me a yes or no answer on that?
Well, we just took these additional steps around making sure that for this weekend, people are not congregating at hair and nail salons, and of course bars and restaurants. I'm discouraging people from congregating in any groups larger than 10 anywhere in the state. That means that across the state, responsible Coloradans are canceling birthday parties and celebrations or moving them.
There's a chance. There's a chance this weekend potentially.
For what?
A lockdown or?
That's how I view things, Joe. Is where else are people congregating and how do we stop it? So we were, after our initial order around bars and restaurants, we got a lot of questions and some and some hair and nail salons had closed on their own, but others were saying, wait a minute here, there's 30 people and 20 of them are over 60 and they're here and they're doing this, and that became a great concern. As people of Colorado, as the press, as others bring these kinds of issues to our attention, we will consider taking actions that can delay the spread by ensuring that people aren't violating, if not the letter, but the spirit of the public health order preventing gatherings of 10 or up. At the same time, we want to ease restrictions on our economy where possible that allows for the market to operate without endangering the public health. And that's the example of the beer and wine delivery as well. And as we want to make sure that people can engage in economic activity, that's very important. And we also want to make sure that we are slowing the spread of the virus here in Colorado so that we can meet the medical surge that we know is looming. Thank you all so much, and particularly thanks to those who've stepped up to serve in our Emergency Economic Council. It is so important, Federico, the rest of you who are here, that this is not an afterthought. And I fear that in some states and some areas, they're all going to do something, but it may be they're so busy dealing with this healthcare surge, they're not even thinking about the economy for a month. And losing a month on that means untold suffering in terms of losing jobs and losing businesses. So it's really important that we stand this up now, because while the public health crisis will touch many of us, many of you will experience illness and loss, the economic crisis will touch all of us, and we want to get, to the extent possible, ahead of that to make sure the thoughtful actions that we're taking allow job creation in Colorado to recover and thrive. Thank you.